Welcome to Be Wise and Relax. Tonight, there is nothing for you to solve, nothing to remember, nowhere else you need to be. You can let your shoulders drop away from your ears, let the weight of the day sink down into the mattress beneath you, and simply listen. We are going to take a slow journey together, a quiet, unhurried walk through one of the oldest questions a human being has ever asked, the question every single one of us carries somewhere in the dark. Where do we go when we die? You do not need to believe anything to be here. You do not need to know a single thing about ancient Egypt or Greece or the cold halls of the Norse or the gentle teachings of the East. We will explain everything gently as we go in plain words. Wherever you are right now, or whatever hour it is where you are listening, whatever you are carrying into this night, feel free to share in a quiet moment what time it is and where you have settled in to rest. It is good to know we are not alone in the dark. So take a slow, deep breath. In through the nose, filling the belly, and out, long and soft, letting it go. Let your eyes grow heavy if they want to. There is no rush tonight. None at all. Let us begin. Imagine for a moment a great hall. The light in it is the color of old gold and the air is very still. Down the center of this hall stands a single object, a balance, a set of scales, the kind a merchant might use to weigh out grain or silver. On one side of the scales sits something almost weightless, a single feather, plucked, they said, from the head of a goddess. And on the other side of those scales, they are about to place a human heart. Your heart. And if your heart weighs even a little more than that feather, if it is heavy with the things you did and did not do in your one short life, then a creature waiting at the foot of the scales will lean forward and eat your soul out of existence forever. This is not a nightmare. This is a hope. This is what the people of ancient Egypt prayed they would face when they died, and what they spent their whole lives and a great deal of their treasure preparing for. They called it the weighing of the heart. And to understand why a person would build their entire life around a moment like this, we have to slow down and we have to walk into that golden hall ourselves. But before we do, I want to plant a small seed in your mind, a gentle question to carry with us through the whole night, like a stone you turn over in your pocket. Here it is. The Egyptians imagined this scene, this hall, this weighing more than 3,000 years ago beside the Nile. They had no contact with the Vikings of the cold north, no contact with the philosophers of Greece, no knowledge of the Persians or the people of India or the deserts where Islam would one day rise. These cultures were separated by oceans, by mountains, by thousands of years. They never met. They could not have copied one another. And yet, and this is the strange thing, the thing we will return to again and again as you drift towards sleep, they all drew almost the same map of the land of the dead. A guide who comes to lead you. A river or a gate you have to cross. A judgment, a weighing, a measuring of the kind of person you turned out to be. And then a sorting into reward or into something darker. Why? Why would the human mind, working alone in valleys and on islands that had never heard of one another, keep inventing the same afterlife again and again from scratch? Hold that question lightly. We are not going to answer it yet. We are simply going to travel slowly from one imagined country of the dead to the next, and let the answer assemble itself quietly in the space behind your eyes. By the time we are done, you may have your own answer, or you may simply have a warm and curious feeling and fall asleep before the end. Either of those is perfectly fine. There is nothing to figure out tonight. So, Back to Egypt, back to the Golden Hall. The Egyptians called this place the Hall of Two Truths, a long pillared chamber where the soul of a person who has just died is brought to stand trial. And I want you to understand something about how the Egyptians felt about death, because it is gentler and stranger than you might expect. They did not see death as the end. They saw it as a doorway, a frightening one, yes, full of tests and dangers, but a doorway that led, if you passed through it well, to a second life that could be even better than the first. The whole enormous effort of Egyptian religion, all those tombs, all those painted walls, was about getting a person safely through that doorway. At the center of the trial stands a goddess named Ma'at. Her name is hard to translate into a single English word, so let me give it to you the way the Egyptians felt it. Ma'at was truth, but she was also order and balance and the way things are supposed to be. Think of the feeling you have when a room is finally tidy, when an argument has finally been set right, when the world for one moment seems fair and in its proper place. That feeling, that rightness, was a goddess to the Egyptians, and her symbol was a single ostrich feather which she wore upon her head, light, honest, impossible to fake the weight of. And so when you died, your heart was weighed against her feather. Now, why the heart? This is one of the most wonderful and surprising details in all of this, and I want to take a moment with it because it tells you so much about how these people understood what a human being is. To the Egyptians, the heart, they called it the aib, was not just a pump that moved blood. The heart was the seat of your intelligence, the home of your memory, your character, your conscience. Everything you had ever truly chosen, every kindness and every cruelty was recorded, they believed, in the heart. The heart was the honest witness of your whole life. It knew everything you had done. And here is the part that surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. When the Egyptians prepared a body for burial, the long, careful process we call mummification, drying and wrapping the body so it would last for thousands of years, they took great care to leave the heart inside the body. They did not remove it. It had to stay right where it belonged because the dead person was going to need it. They were going to stand trial with it. Without the heart, there could be no weighing, and without the weighing, no second life. But the brain? The brain they threw away. They reached in through the nose with a long hooked tool, and they pulled the brain out, piece by piece, and they discarded it. They thought it was useless, just stuffing for the skull, a wet, grey thing of no importance at all. Sit with that for a moment because it is genuinely strange to us. We are the opposite. We believe the brain is where the self lives, where we think, where we love, where we are. To us, the heart is mostly a muscle, and we'd be horrified to throw away a brain. But to them, the truth of who you were lived in the heart, and the brain was rubbish. Keep this picture in your mind, and the heart kept, the brain discarded, because in a little while it is going to make perfect, beautiful sense. They kept the heart because the heart was the one that had to testify. Now into the Golden Hall's steps the figure who runs the trial. And if you have ever seen a picture of ancient Egypt, you have almost certainly seen him. He has the body of a man and the head of a jackal, a kind of wild desert dog, sleek and black with tall, pointed ears. His name is Anubis. Anubis was the god who watched over the dead, the one who looked after the bodies in their tombs. And here, in the Hall of Two Truths, he is the one who carefully adjusts the great scales and sets the heart upon one pan and the feather of Ma'at upon the other. Picture his long, careful fingers steadying the balance, making sure the weighing is fair. There is something almost tender in it. He is not there to trick you. He is there to find out the truth. And standing nearby, watching everything, is another god, this one with the head of a long-beaked bird, an ibis, a wading bird of the riverbanks. His name is Thoth. Thoth was the god of writing, of wisdom, of records and knowledge, and his job in this scene is to be the clerk of the court. He holds a reed pen and a scroll, and he writes down the verdict. Whatever the scales decide, Thoth records it forever in the great ledger of the dead. So you have the jackal who weighs and the ibis who writes, the judge and the recorder. Calm, patient, exact. But you, the dead person, you are not allowed to simply stand there in silence and wait for the scales to tip. No. You have something to say. And here is one of the most extraordinary parts of the whole Egyptian afterlife, a part that survives to us written on papyrus scrolls, the kind of scroll a wealthy Egyptian would have buried with them, like an instruction manual for the journey ahead. We call this collection of spells and instructions the Book of the Dead, and one particular chapter, which scholars call Spell 125, contains the very words you were meant to speak at your trial. It is called the negative confession, and it is not a list of the good things you did. It is a list of the bad things you did not do. You stand before the scales and before a panel of 42 divine judges, 42 assessor gods, each one assigned to a particular sin. And you speak to them, one by one, declaring your innocence. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. I have not caused anyone pain. I have not taken food from the hungry. I have not made anyone weep. Down the whole long list of 42, you address each god by name, and to each one you say, in effect, the wrong that is yours to judge. I did not do it. Imagine speaking that aloud 42 times, declaring the shape of a clean life. It is, in a strange way, a kind of mirror. To know what the Egyptians thought made a good person, you only have to read what they swore they had not done. They had not stolen, had not killed, had not lied, had not caused pain, had not been cruel to animals, had not polluted the river, had not been deaf to words of truth. It is, when you really listen to it, a deeply human list. The same things we would hope, even now, that a good person leaves undone. And as you speak, the scales settle. The heart on one side, the feather on the other. And everyone in the hall watches the balance to see which way it tips. If your heart is light, if it weighs no more than the feather of truth, because you lived honestly and kindly and did not let it grow heavy with the weight of cruelty, then you have passed. Thoth records it. The way opens before you, and you go on to your reward, which we will arrive at in just a little while. But if your heart is heavy, if it is weighed down, sinking the pan toward the floor, dragged low by all the things you did and tried to hide, then there is a creature waiting. She has been crouched there the whole time, at the foot of the scales, patient and hungry. The Egyptians called her Amit, and her name meant the devourer. And she was assembled in the imagination of those ancient artists out of the three most fearsome animals they knew: the head of a crocodile, the front of a lion or a leopard, and the back end of a hippopotamus. To us, a hippo sounds almost gentle, but to a person living beside the Nile, the hippopotamus was one of the most dangerous animals alive, a creature that could capsize a boat and crush a man. So Amit was, quite deliberately, every terror of the river and the riverbank fused into one waiting shape. And if your heart failed the weighing, Amit ate it. She ate the heart, and with it she ate you. Not into a place of fire and torment, as some later cultures would imagine. Into nothing, into non-existence. The Egyptians had a phrase for this: the second death. The first death was the one that brought you to the hall. The second death was the one that erased you completely, forever, so that not even a shadow of you remained. There was no eternal punishment because there was no longer any you to punish. You simply, finally stopped. And to a people who had built their entire civilization around the dream of living on after death, who had spent fortunes on tombs meant to last forever, this, to simply cease, to be unmade, to be eaten out of existence, this was the most terrible fate that could possibly be imagined. So now you understand the stakes of that quiet golden hall. The whole of your eternity weighed against a feather. And now that you understand how much was riding on the honesty of that one little organ, the heart, let me tell you why they kept it in the body so carefully while they threw the brain away. Do you remember? It is time for that picture to make sense. They kept the heart because the heart was the witness. The heart was the one thing that knew the truth about you and could not be fooled. When you stood there reciting your beautiful confession, I have not stolen, I have not lied. It was your own heart sitting on the scale that either confirmed your words or betrayed them by its weight. The heart could not be argued with. It simply weighed what it weighed. The brain, to them, knew nothing that mattered for the trial. But the heart knew everything, so of course they kept it. You cannot stand trial without the one witness who saw your whole life. The brain was thrown away because it had nothing to testify. The heart was kept lovingly because it had everything to testify. There, now the picture is whole. But here is where it becomes wonderfully, mischievously human. Because if your eternal fate depends on your own heart telling the truth about you on the scales, and you happen to know that your heart has a few heavy things in it, well, what would a clever, frightened person do? They would try to keep the witness quiet. And that is exactly what they did. The Egyptians made small amulets, little carved charms shaped like a scarab, a dung beetle of all things, which they revered as a symbol of new life and the rising sun, because it rolled its little ball along the ground the way they imagined the sun being rolled across the sky. They carved these scarabs out of stone and they placed them right over the heart of the mummified body, wrapped in among the bandages, resting on the chest. And onto these heart scarabs they inscribed a spell. Another chapter from the Book of the Dead, this one called Spell 30b. And do you know what that spell says? It is one of the most quietly astonishing things in all of human history. The spell is addressed to the dead person's own heart. And it commands the heart, please, it begs almost, do not stand against me, do not betray me, do not testify as a witness for the other side, do not weigh down the scales, do not let them turn me away. In other words, the heart scarab is a small carved instruction telling your own conscience to keep its mouth shut at your trial. Think about what that means. They imagined a divine court of perfect justice, with a goddess of truth, with 42 judges, with scales that could not be deceived, and then, because they were human and afraid and not at all sure their hearts were light enough, they tucked a little magic charm into the bandages to rig the trial, to silence the one witness who knew too much. It is, if you think about it, both very sly and very tender. It is the act of a frightened person who wants to be good, who hopes they have been good, but who cannot be quite sure, and so brings a little insurance just in case. They were, in the end, exactly like us, hoping their lives would weigh out light, quietly terrified that they might not. Let us pause here for just a moment. There is no hurry to move on. Take a slow, deep breath in through the nose and let it go, soft and long. Feel the weight of your own body here, safe, in this moment. Whatever your day held, the things you did, and the things you wish you had done differently, you can set them down now. They are not on any scale tonight. You do not need to confess anything or defend anything or be measured against any feather. You only need to rest. Let that be enough. And when you are ready, with no rush at all, we will continue, and we will follow the soul that passed its trial, the one whose heart weighed light, to see where the Egyptians believed it finally went. Because for those who made it through the Golden Hall, there was a reward waiting. And it was, in its way, one of the loveliest visions of paradise any people ever dreamed. Breathe. Settle deeper into the warmth of your bed. And let us continue together. So, your heart has been weighed and found light. Anubis steps back from the scales. Thoth marks his scroll with a verdict in your favor. The 42 judges are satisfied. Amit the devourer settles back down, disappointed, to wait for the next soul. And the way opens before you out of the Golden Hall into the country of the blessed dead. The Egyptians called this place Aru. Sometimes you will hear it called the Field of Reeds. And here is what I love about it. They did not imagine paradise as something strange and alien, a place of clouds and harps and unfamiliar joys. They imagined paradise as Egypt, the Egypt they already loved but made perfect. The Field of Reeds was a mirror of their own homeland, the same wide blue sky, the same fertile black earth along the river, the same tall green reeds rustling at the water's edge. But here, in Aru, the floods always came at the right time. The harvests were always abundant. The grain grew tall and golden, and there was never any hunger, never any want. It was their world, with all the hardship gently taken out of it. This tells you something so warm about the human heart. When these people sat down to imagine the most perfect place they could possibly go, they did not invent something exotic. They imagined home, the familiar fields they had walked all their lives, the river they had grown up beside, the reeds and the birds and the good black soil, only finally, blessedly, without struggle. Heaven was simply their own loved world, set right at last. And there is something in that I find very tender, very human, and very easy to fall asleep inside of. The idea that paradise might just be the ordinary things we already love, made gentle and made to last. But, and here, the Egyptians were nothing if not practical. Even a perfect field has to be worked. There was still grain to be planted in Aru, still earth to be turned, channels to be dug, crops to be brought in, and a wealthy Egyptian, an important person, well. They had not done their own farm labor in this life, and they certainly did not intend to start in the next one. Paradise should be restful, after all. And so they came up with a solution, and it is one of the most charming details in this whole long story. They made little figurines, small carved or molded figures shaped like a wrapped human figure, often holding tiny hoes and baskets and farming tools. They were called shabti, sometimes ushabti, and their job was to be servants for the dead in the afterlife. The idea was simple and rather wonderful. When the gods of Aru called upon the dead person to come and do some labor in the eternal fields, the little shabti would magically step forward in their place and answer, "Here I am," and do the work, so that the dead person could simply rest and enjoy their paradise. And the Egyptians, being thorough, did not stop at one. The truly well-prepared filled their tombs with whole armies of these little servants. Sometimes one shabti for every single day of the year, 365 of them, a tiny laborer for each day, so that no day of eternity would find you without help. And then, on top of that, they added overseer figures, slightly larger ones, to supervise the rest. A whole little workforce of clay, complete with foremen, buried in the dark, waiting patiently to spring to life until the eternal fields so that their master never had to lift a finger. Picture that for a moment as you lie there in the soft dark. A great king or a wealthy noble passed safely through the trial of the heart, now reclining in the green fields of a perfected Egypt beside a gentle, eternal river. And all around them, hundreds of tiny servant figures rising up out of the earth to do the season's work, so that their master can simply lie back in the warm sun and rest. They thought of everything. Even in paradise, they made sure there would be no chores. Even in eternity, they arranged things so that they could finally, fully rest. And that, perhaps, is the deepest wish hiding underneath all of it. Underneath the scales and the feather, underneath the jackal-headed god and the bird-headed clerk, underneath the little carved beetles whispering to silent hearts and the armies of clay servants, underneath all of it is something very simple and very close to what you might be feeling right now as your breathing slows and your body grows heavy. The longing to pass through the dark doorway safely. The hope that we have been good enough. And the deep, deep wish to arrive, at last, somewhere familiar and kind, where the work is finally done and we are allowed completely to rest. Hold that gentle feeling. We will carry it with us because the Egyptians were only the first stop on our long night's journey. Far away, across the sea, in a land of olive groves and bright islands, another people were drawing their own map of the country of the dead. And on their map, too, though they had never heard a word of Anubis or Mayat or the field of reeds, there was a crossing to be made, a guide to be paid, and judges waiting in the dark to decide where each soul belonged. But that crossing, and the strange small coin you needed to make it, can wait just a little while longer. There was a custom in ancient Greece practiced for centuries with great care and seriousness, and if you had walked through Athens or Corinth or any of the old hill cities at the right moment, you might have witnessed it in a quiet room near the edge of grief. A body prepared for burial. And before the jaw was wrapped shut, before the grave goods were gathered, a small copper coin, an obol, was placed carefully in the mouth of the dead. Not as a symbol, not as a gesture of sentiment, as payment. Because the dead, everyone understood, would need it. Archaeologists have been digging up the dead of ancient Greece for more than 2 centuries now, and they still find them. Skeletons, centuries old, centuries dry, and there between the teeth or tucked beneath the tongue, a coin, an obol, the fare for the crossing, the price of passage into whatever lay on the other side of the water that divided the living world from the world of the dead. That water had a name. It was the river Styx. And the man who poled the flat-bottomed boat across it, the boatman, the ferryman, the silent figure at the oar, was named Charon. He was ancient even in antiquity. Homer wrote of him. Hesiod wrote of him. Virgil, centuries later, writing in Latin, would describe him still standing at his post, pole in hand, his cloak the colour of soot, his eyes like lit coals. He was not kind, he was not cruel. He was simply necessary. The way a door is necessary, the way a river is something you have to cross, whether you want to or not. And he demanded his payment before he would push off from the shore. Imagine being the soul who arrived without it. The Greeks had imagined that too. If you came to the bank of the Styx without an obol, Charon would not take you. You would wait on the far shore in a kind of drift, a kind of in-between, unable to cross, unable to return. The ancients believed that the unburied dead wandered in this way, which is partly why burial was so important, so urgent, so close to sacred. To leave the dead unburied was not merely disrespectful, it was to strand them. to leave them without their coin, without their crossing, without whatever waited on the other side. And so the living pressed a coin to the lips of their dead, and they hoped it would be enough. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of your body settling. Notice what has grown a little softer around your shoulders, around your jaw. When you are ready, we will continue together. We are crossing now. The Styx was not the only river in the underworld. There were 5 of them, 5 rivers threading through the landscape of the dead, each with its own nature, its own name, its own terrible gift. And if you spend a moment with each of them, you will find that the Greeks had thought with great precision about what it might actually feel like to be dead. The Styx was the river of hatred, or, more precisely, of oaths. The gods themselves swore by it, and to break an oath sworn upon the Styx was the gravest thing an immortal could do. It was the river that separated the worlds absolutely. There was no swimming the Styx, no bridging it with anything but Charon's boat and Charon's indifference and the small copper coin you hoped was still in your mouth. Then there was the Acheron. This one you feel in your chest rather than in your mind. Acheron means something like woe or grief, the river of sorrow. Some sources describe it as the river you approached first, before the Styx, and others weave them together until they blur. But the feeling persists across every version, that the crossing into the land of the dead was not a cheerful journey. You were not boarding a pleasure boat. You were sailing away from everything you had loved, and the water around the hull was the color of grief. The Cocytus was the river of lamentation, of wailing. Its name echoes the Greek word for crying out. The sound of it, the old poets implied, was the sound of mourning. Or perhaps it was made of mourning, as if all the weeping of all the bereaved had poured itself into a single underground river and found its channel here in the dark beneath the world. The Phlegethon was fire, a river of flames, not metaphorical flames, but actual burning water, actual burning current, running parallel to the cold rivers, as though the underworld needed both ice and fire to cover all the possibilities of what the dead might face. Dante, writing over 1,000 years later, remembered the Phlegethon when he built his own vision of the underworld, and you can feel its heat in his Inferno still. And then there was the Lethe. The Lethe is the one that stays with you, because its gift was forgetting. Lethe means oblivion, the river of forgetfulness, of unmemory, of erasure. If a soul drank from the Lethe, it forgot, not some things, everything. Every name it had ever known, every face it had ever loved, every morning it had ever woken up in, every pain and every sweetness and every ordinary afternoon, all of it washed clean, gone. Why would the Greeks imagine such a thing? There was a logic to it. In some versions of the afterlife, the Lethe was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. Souls who were to be reborn would drink from it before returning to the living world, so they could start fresh, unburdened by what had come before. The forgetting was, in a sense, a kindness, or at least a practical solution. And here, quietly, in a river that an ancient Greek poet named centuries before the Vedas were translated into any Western language, you find an echo of something we will return to, the question of why the reborn do not remember. Different civilizations, separated by deserts and oceans, kept arriving at the same answer. They drink and they forget. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Charon has taken your coin, and the boat has reached the far shore, and now, before the judges, before the sorting, there is the gate, and at the gate there is a dog. He is not a small dog. He is not, in most accounts, a pleasant dog. His name is Cerberus, and he has 3 heads. Some poets gave him 50, but 3 is what settled into the imagination and stayed there. 3 heads, a mane of serpents, a tail that may itself have been a snake, and a single terrible purpose: to let souls in and to prevent any soul from leaving. He was not, in other words, keeping you out. He was keeping you in. There is something worth sitting with in that detail. The gate to the underworld did not bar entry, it barred escape. The dead could always enter. It was the living who had to beg or trick or fight their way in. And even the greatest heroes, Heracles, Orpheus, Odysseus, could not simply walk through the gate of the dead without extraordinary effort and extraordinary cost. Cerberus watched from his post and let each shade pass, and behind him the realm of Hades began to unfold. Let us pause here once more. Breathe slowly. The sound of the water behind us is fading now, the boat is gone, and Charon has already turned around, already pushing back toward the shore of the living, already waiting for the next one. We are inside the underworld of the Greeks now. And it is not quite what most people expect. It is not primarily a place of fire and screaming, not for most people. The default destination, the place where the ordinary dead went, the ones who were neither heroic nor wicked, who had lived their lives with modest virtue and modest failing, who had loved their families and quarreled with their neighbors, and eaten too much at festivals and been impatient with their children and done their best, was a place called the Asphodel Meadows. Asphodel is a real flower. It grows in the Mediterranean, pale and waist-high, a little ghostly, a little like the memory of a flower, and the meadows named for it were neither pleasant nor terrible. They were grey, they were neutral, they were the colour of an ordinary day from which all the warmth has been removed. The souls who drifted there were not in pain, they were not being punished, they simply were, dimly, hazily, without much consciousness or much feeling, wandering among the pale flowers in a permanent mild fog. The Greeks imagined death for most people as a kind of reduction. Not an annihilation, but a dimming. You were still there, still yourself, in some faint sense. But the brightness had gone out. Achilles ended up there. Achilles, the greatest of all the Greek warriors, the man who chose a short, glorious life over a long, forgettable one, who burned so brightly in battle that the Trojans fled before him like sparrows before a hawk, who killed Hector and wept over Patroclus, and who was himself so dear to the gods that his mother was a sea goddess who dipped him in the Styx to make him nearly invincible. That Achilles. He drifted in the Asphodel Meadows, and when Odysseus descended to the underworld, this is in the 11th book of the Odyssey, one of the oldest and strangest passages in all of Western literature, and when Odysseus called up the shades of the dead to question them, and Achilles came forward out of the grey, the first thing Achilles said was this: "Do not console me for being dead. I would rather be a living slave to the poorest man on earth than be king of all the dead." Let that land for a moment. This is Achilles speaking, the man who chose glory, the man who died young so that his name would last forever. And in the underworld, looking back at everything, his verdict on the afterlife, on the great grey dimness that awaited even the finest and most celebrated of human lives, was that he would trade it all, every bit of his immortal fame, to be alive again. Even in the most reduced and humiliating form of life possible, even as a slave. The early Greek afterlife was not a reward. It was a remainder. Whatever you had been, whatever you had done, whatever brightness had defined you, most of it went out. Achilles in the Asphodel Meadows was a shadow of Achilles on the walls of Troy. This is striking, and it is easy to overlook. We have grown so accustomed to the idea that death is a doorway to something better, to paradise, to reunion, to the full flowering of the self, that the starkness of the early Greek vision can take the breath away. They were not offering comfort, they were telling the truth as they saw it. The dead are less than the living. However good your life was, it was better than this. And yet, and here is the thing that pulls the blanket a little tighter. Even this bleak grey place had its exceptions. There was Elysium. Some called it the Elysian Fields or the Islands of the Blessed. It was the destination of the truly extraordinary heroes, demigods, those whom the gods especially favoured, those who had been exceptionally righteous in some versions, those who had been initiated into the mysteries in others. The criteria shifted depending on who was telling the story, but the destination itself was consistent, a place of warmth and ease and something genuinely good. The sun shone on Elysium. There was music and games and the company of the excellent. It was the opposite of the asphodel meadows in every way. And far below both of them, far below everything, below the root of the world, was Tartarus. Tartarus was not simply the Greek equivalent of hell, it was older than Hades, older than the gods themselves in some accounts. A primordial abyss, a place of absolute depth, as far below the earth is below the sky. The Titans, the old gods defeated by the Olympians, were imprisoned there. And in its depths, the worst of the human dead were sentenced to their punishments. Those punishments were remarkable, not for their violence. There was little blood in the punishments of Tartarus, but for their psychological precision, for their perfect, excruciating ingenuity. Take Sisyphus. He was a king who had cheated death, literally more than once. He had tricked Thanatos, the personification of death, chained him up so that no one could die, and had to be forcibly retrieved from the underworld when he managed to arrange permission to return to the living world to sort out his funeral, and then simply declined to go back. A clever man, an incorrigible man. And his punishment was a boulder, not a small boulder, a great one, and every day, forever, Sisyphus rolls it up a hill. He pushes and strains and works his way toward the summit, and every time, just before he reaches the top, the boulder rolls back down. He begins again and again and again. There is no summit, there is no completion, there is only the effort, repeated without end, stripped of all meaning, producing nothing. The punishment of Sisyphus is not physical torture in any simple sense. It is the removal of purpose. The Greeks looked at meaningless repetitive labor and said, "This is what the worst of what we can imagine looks like." Then there was Tantalus. Tantalus was a king who had been invited to dine with the gods and had, in a spectacular act of hubris too dark to describe gently before sleep, offended them beyond recovery. His punishment was this: he stands in a pool of cool water in a field beneath fruit trees heavy with ripe fruit. He is hungry, he is thirsty. When he bends to drink, the water recedes from his lips. When he reaches for the fruit, the branch lifts just beyond his grasp. An eternity of almost, an eternity of the thing you need just beyond the reach of your fingers. We still carry his name. When something desirable is visible but out of reach, we call it tantalizing. We say we were tantalized. The word traveled out of the underworld of the ancient Greeks and into every dictionary ever printed since, and we use it every day without thinking of the man standing in the water that will not let itself be drunk. Then there were the Danaids, the 50 daughters of Danaus, who had each killed their husbands on their wedding night. 49 of them anyway. Their punishment was a jar with a hole in it, and they were condemned to carry water and to fill the jar forever. And it was never filled because the water always ran out. Sisyphus and his boulder, Tantalus and his water, the Danaids and their leaking jar. The Greeks were not imagining fire and brimstone, they were imagining futility. The punishment is not pain so much as it is the endless emptying of effort. You work and arrive nowhere. You reach and touch nothing. You pour and nothing holds. It is almost more disturbing for being so familiar, because everyone alive has known a version of those feelings, at least briefly. And the Greeks were saying, imagine that, unending. Before we leave the Greek underworld, we should mention the three judges, because the sorting into Elysium, into the asphodel meadows, into Tartarus, didn't happen by accident or by luck. There were judges, 3 of them. Their names were Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. All 3 had once been great kings, wise and just, and renowned for their fairness. After death, they were elevated to the bench of the underworld, tasked with reviewing the lives of the dead and determining where each soul belonged. Plato describes them in the Gorgias, the great Athenian philosopher who found the Greek popular mythology about the afterlife both important and insufficient, and who tried to take it seriously, to reason through what a just accounting of a human life might actually look like. What is notable about the judges is that Plato specifies they hear the cases of the naked soul, stripped of its wealth, its reputation, its family name, the beauty or ugliness of the body it had worn. All of that irrelevant. The judges look at the soul itself, at the marks left upon it by the life it had lived, the way a body carries its scars, and here, quietly but unmistakably, the same machinery is running that we saw in Egypt. A life examined, a soul weighed, not literally perhaps, but assessed, considered, judged against a standard, and a sorting into reward or punishment or neutral grey based on what that life had actually contained. The means differ. The feather of Maat is not the bench of Minos, Anubis is not Aeacus, but the architecture is the same. A human life stands before a tribunal, something immovable and true assesses it, and then it is sent where it belongs. We planted that thought early at the very beginning of this journey, the question of why unconnected civilizations keep drawing the same map. And here, between Egypt and Greece, between the Nile and the Aegean, between civilizations that did have contact with each other, but that developed these particular visions largely independently, you can begin to feel the shape of the answer forming, but we will not rush toward it yet. There is more country to cross first. Let us pause here. Take a breath, long and slow. Let your body grow a little heavier where you're lying. Notice the quiet around the edges of your awareness, the way it softens things just slightly. When you are ready, we will continue. We are moving northward now, far northward, to a colder world and a harder coast, and a people who looked at the same darkness every human faces and imagined something wilder and stranger and, in its own way, just as precise. But there is one more thing to say about Greece before we leave it, because there is a temptation when you list the punishments of Tartarus and the gloom of the asphodel meadows to conclude that the Greeks were pessimistic about death, that they looked at the afterlife and saw only grey and suffering and the cold echo of whatever the living world had been. And in the earliest period, in Homer's period, that is largely true. The underworld of the Iliad and the Odyssey is a bleak place, and Achilles' lament, his preference for the living slave over the dead king, is the emotional truth of that world. But Greece was a civilization that thought hard and long and continuously about almost everything, and over the centuries the vision shifted and deepened and complicated itself. Mystery cults. The Eleusinian mysteries, above all, held every year at Eleusis near Athens for over 1,000 years, promised initiates something better. A different kind of death, a different kind of arrival. The details of the Eleusinian mysteries were kept secret on pain of death, which is part of why we still do not fully know what they revealed. But those who had been initiated seem to have faced death with something closer to equanimity, even to hope. Plato, again, who filtered so much of what would survive of Greek thought, takes the afterlife seriously. In the Phaedo, in the Republic, in the Gorgias, he returns and returns to the question. And his vision is warmer and more architecturally elaborate than Homer's. There is judgment, but the judgment is fair. There are rewards and they are real. There is even reincarnation. Souls choosing their next lives in the myth of air at the end of the Republic, from a display of possible futures laid out before them. The Greeks were not static. Their map of the dead evolved over centuries, responding to human need, to theological argument, to the deepening pressure of the question that does not go away. What happens to us? Where do we go? They kept asking, they kept revising. And somewhere in the Aegean, or perhaps on a beach at dusk with the olive trees turning silver in the fading light, someone thought of the ferryman and the coin and the river that had to be crossed. And it seemed so right, so precisely and almost physically accurate to the experience of grief, of the gap that opens between the living and the dead. This sense of a crossing, a divide, water between the worlds, a guide who carries the beloved away across something you cannot follow, that it became the image that lasted. It is still lasting. We still use the phrase crossing over. We still imagine death as a threshold, a passage, a journey across some invisible water. We still feel when someone we love dies that they have gone somewhere else, somewhere behind a membrane we cannot penetrate, and that something carries them there, and that the cost of it is something precious left behind. The Greeks did not invent that feeling. Nobody invented that feeling, but they drew it as clearly as anyone ever has. And now, far to the north, in a land where the sea is grey, and the winters are long and the warriors were expected to be grateful for a good death in battle, another map of the dead was being drawn. It shared almost nothing with Greece on the surface. No olive trees, no sun-warmed marble, no philosophers arguing in porticos. Just the cold north wind and the old stories told around fires, and a hall somewhere above the clouds that was waiting for you, if you had earned it. That hall was Valhalla. And the story of it is stranger and wilder and more specific than you might expect. Take a slow breath. We are moving north now. The Mediterranean warmth is behind us. The air changes. There is salt in it and something colder, something that smells of pine and iron. And somewhere above us, far above the clouds, just beyond the reach of the visible world, the lights in the great hall are burning. We will find our way there, and to everything that lies alongside it and beneath it in just a moment. But let us stay for just a breath longer with the coin in the mouth of the dead, and the grey river, and the old ferryman who has been waiting at his post since before history had a name for him. Because the Greeks noticed something that we will keep noticing the further this journey takes us. The dead need a guide. They need someone or something who knows the way. Because the way is not obvious, is not marked, is not a road you can find by looking. You need the ferryman to cross. You need someone who belongs to both worlds, who can move between them, who can carry you from one shore to the other without losing you in the water between. The Greeks called such figures, such guides of the dead, psychopompoi, soul guides. Hermes was the divine psychopomp, in addition to being the messenger of the gods. But the most vivid, the most picturable, was Charon. Just Charon, with his pole and his coin demand and his old eyes. We saw him already, in Egypt, in the shape of Anubis, conducting, guiding, escorting the heart toward the scales. A different figure, a different tradition, a different continent, and yet the function identical. The soul needs a guide. Across the world and across the centuries, every culture that has drawn a map of the dead has put a guide in it. We will see more of them before this journey is done. For now, let the coin rest. Let the river settle into quiet around us. And as your breathing finds its own slow rhythm and the weight of your body presses gently into wherever you are lying, let yourself begin very gently to feel the temperature dropping as we move north. Valhalla is waiting. The cold comes first, before any image, before any sound, the cold, a kind of cold that belongs to iron and open water and grey sky pressing down on grey sea. If Egypt was the warm dark of a lamp-lit inner chamber, stone walls close around you, a goddess's feather trembling on the scales, this is the opposite. This is open. This is wind. This is a landscape that does not soften itself for you, that offers no shade and no gentle explanation, only the fact of itself, enormous and indifferent, and somehow, underneath all of that, ferociously alive. The Norse imagined their dead going to more than one place. That is the first thing to understand. It was never a single destination. The world of the dead in the Norse vision was a geography, plural, differentiated, specific. Where you ended up depended not only on how you lived, but on how you died. The manner of dying mattered enormously, and this is where the Norse tradition diverges from almost everything we have visited so far. In Egypt, the question was moral. Did your heart weigh clean against the feather? In Greece, the question was also moral. The three judges sorting the virtuous from the wicked, but in the Norse world, one of the primary sorting mechanisms was not moral in the ethical sense at all. It was practical, almost brutal in its practicality. Did you die with a weapon in your hand? That question, more than almost any other, would determine where you spent whatever came after. The hall itself, the most famous hall in all of Norse mythology and arguably in all of world mythology, was Valhalla. The name means simply the Hall of the Slain. Val from Valor, meaning the battlefield dead. Halla, meaning hall. There is no attempt at poetry in the name, no gentle euphemism. You are the slain and this is your hall. Odin built it, or rather, Odin presides over it, claims it, fills it. Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed god, who gave an eye to drink from the well of wisdom, who hung himself on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights to learn the runes, who wanders the mortal world in disguise with his wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Odin is, among many other things, the god of the dead, the god of warriors, the god of wisdom gained at terrible cost. And Valhalla is his project, his preparation, his ongoing response to a knowledge that weighs on him more heavily than anything else in the Norse cosmos. He knows how the world ends. In the Norse tradition, the world does not go on forever. There is a day coming, the day called Ragnarok, when the forces of chaos, the great monsters, the fire giant Surtur, the Midgard serpent, the wolf Fenrir, will rise against the gods, and the gods will fight, and most of them will die. The world itself will burn and sink into the sea before being reborn. Odin knows this. He has always known this. And so Valhalla is not merely a reward. It is a training program, a recruitment operation, a war machine that has been building for eons, one dead warrior at a time. This changes everything about how Valhalla works. The warriors who are chosen, who are taken after death to fill Valhalla's vast halls, are called the Einherjar. That word carries the sense of those who fight alone, or those who are preeminent fighters. Each day in Valhalla, the Einherjar do what they were built for. They fight. They arm themselves, and they go out into the great courtyard, and they battle one another with every skill and ferocity they possess. They die, Men who were already dead are killed again, their wounds real, their pain real, their loss real. And then, every evening, without exception, they are restored. The wounds close, the dead rise, and the Einherjar walk back into the great hall, alive once more, to sit down at the long tables and feast. This happens every day. Every single day, for years, for centuries, for however long there is still time before Ragnarök. The dying and the rising and the feasting, the dying and the rising and the feasting, over and over in a loop that never ends until the end of everything. When you hear it quickly, it sounds almost like torture. But the Norse did not understand it that way at all. This was glory. This was the highest possible gift, to be among the chosen, to be taken by the Valkyries from the field where your body fell, to wake in Odin's hall and spend your eternity doing the thing you were made for. This was not punishment. This was completion. And the feast was real. The boar they ate was named Sehrimnir. Every evening Sehrimnir was cooked and served, the flesh divided among all the Einherjar, the tables heavy with meat. And every morning Sehrimnir was whole again, restored as the warriors themselves were restored, the same animal, undiminished, ready to be cooked once more. The Norse sources in the Prose Edda, the great mythological compendium written down by the Icelandic scholar Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century, drawing on oral traditions far older than himself, describes Sehrimnir with a kind of matter-of-fact wonder. The boar is cooked every day it is whole again. That is simply how it is. The mead was provided by the goat Heidrun, not a keg, not a barrel, a goat. Heidrun stood on the roof of Valhalla and ate the leaves of the world tree, the great ash Yggdrasil, and from her udder flowed mead in such quantities that it filled a great vat, enough to keep every one of the Einherjar drinking through the long feast evening. Again, the source that describes this offers no explanation, no apology, no attempt to make it logical. The goat is on the roof. The mead flows. These are the facts. There is something almost tender about this if you sit with it. The Norse imagined their paradise as simply more of what they loved. More fighting, yes, but also more eating, more drinking, more comradeship. The long table and the firelight and the meat and the mead and the men you had fought beside. This was what they wanted to keep. Not transcendence, not dissolution into the divine. Not an end to struggle. Just the feast at the end of the day. Just the table and the fire and the people you recognized. But here is the thing that popular retellings almost always omit. Odin chose only half the battle dead, half. The other half went somewhere else entirely. They went to Freyja. Freyja, whose name means simply the lady, is one of the most complex figures in all of Norse mythology. She is associated with love, with magic, with gold and amber, and the tears she wept for her missing husband, Odur. She is a warrior in her own right. She taught Odin the form of magic known as Seder. She is fierce and complicated and not easily categorized. And she held, as a right, not as a gift from Odin, the first choice among the battlefield dead. Her field was called Folkvanga, the field of the people, or the field of the host. The Prose Edda, in the poem Grimnismal, states it plainly. Freyja chooses half the slain for her hall, Sessrumnir, the seat-roomy one, a hall with space enough for everyone. Odin chooses the other half. Popular culture built the story of Valhalla and forgot Freyja entirely. The image that survived, the warriors, the Valkyries, the hall of the slain, is real, but it is incomplete. there is another destination for the honored dead. Another divine host, another hall, warm and vast, in a goddess's keeping. And we cannot know from the surviving sources exactly what daily existence in Folkvanga looked like. The Eddas give us much more detail about Valhalla, but the existence of Folkvanga is there clearly in the text. Half the slain, Freya's right, her hall, her keeping, her choice. This matters because it tells us something about how the Norse understood the afterlife that a simple Valhalla story cannot tell you. The dead were not under a single authority. The cosmos was shared. Even in the realm of the honored dead, there were two claims, two halls, two keepers, Odin with his strategic eye always on Ragnarök, and Freya with her own deep and complex sovereignty. Death, in the Norse imagination, was not Odin's alone to adjudicate. But what about everyone else? Because most people, even as now, did not die in battle. Most people died in the ordinary ways that human beings die. Old age, wearing the body slowly down until it gave out. Illness, the long fever, or the slow fading. The kind of death that comes quietly in a bed with people sitting beside you. The Norse had a term for this, the straw death. To die on the straw, the bedding, indoors, of sickness or age. And the straw death did not bring you to Valhalla. It did not bring you to Folkvanga. It brought you to a third place, a different place entirely. It brought you to hell. The name will trip a wire in your mind because we have grown up in a world where that word means something very specific. Torment, fire, punishment, the opposite of heaven. But that is not what hell means in the Norse tradition. Not primarily, not at its root. Hell is a realm, and hell is also a being, a figure, a ruler, a keeper of the dead. She is the daughter of Loki and the giantess Angerboda. She rules the realm that bears her name. In some descriptions, she is half living and half dead in her own body. One half of her colored like a healthy human being, the other half the pale, dark-tinged color of a corpse. She is not evil. She is not even necessarily cruel. She is simply the keeper of those who die the ordinary death, the death that comes without a weapon's edge. Her realm is cold. It is dim. The sources describe it as a place of fading, of shadowy continuation, not suffering in the acute sense, but not warmth either. The Prose Edda gives it a series of proper names that carry a kind of grim poetry. The road to it is called Helvega, the Hell Road. There is a river called Gjöll. The name suggests noise, perhaps the crashing sound of water, that the dead must cross. And over the Gjöll there is a bridge called Gjallarbrú. The Gjallarbrú is thatched with gold. That is not nothing. Gold in the Norse imagination was the most beautiful, the most precious thing. And even the bridge leading to the realm of ordinary death is golden. Whatever else hell is, the bridge into it is beautiful. And the bridge is guarded. The guardian's name is Modguda. A maiden, the sources say, whose name means something like the battle-weary spirit, or the one exhausted by fighting. Modguda stands on the Gjallarbrú, and she watches, and she asks the dead their name and their lineage before she lets them cross. When the hero Hermodr rides to hell on Odin's horse, Sleipnir, to beg for the return of the god Balder, it is Modguda who meets him at the bridge and tells him he does not look like a dead man, that his complexion is still too vivid, too alive. She is observant, she is watchful, she belongs to the bridge the way Charon belongs to the Styx, the way Anubis belongs to the weighing hall. Another guide, another threshold keeper. There she is again, at another crossing, in another tradition. The soul, in the Norse imagination as in the Greek and the Egyptian, does not find its way unaided, there is always someone waiting. Beyond the bridge, beyond Modguda and her golden crossing, the realm of hell extends in its cold and quiet. The prose Edda names its domains and its inhabitants with an almost bureaucratic thoroughness. There is a hall called Eljudnir, the one sprayed with snowstorms or the damp with sleet. Hell herself lives there. Her dish is called hunger. Her knife is called famine. Her bed is named sickbed. Her threshold is called stumbling block. Each domestic object named for something that brings suffering. Not torture, just the steady domestic weight of human diminishment. Hunger and sickness and the threshold you stumble over in the dark. Hell's hall is life's hardships, preserved and made permanent, stripped of any hope of remedy. This is not the same as punishment. The people in hell did not end up there because they did something wrong. They ended up there because they died the straw death, because their bodies gave out, because they were ordinary human beings living ordinary human lives that ended in the ordinary way. There is no moral sorting in hell, only the sorting by manner of death. In that sense, the Norse hell has more in common with the early Greek Hades, the grey, neutral, undifferentiated persistence of the dead, than it does with anything we would call hell in the Christian sense. But wait, because the Norse tradition does have a place of genuine punishment, a place specifically reserved for those who committed acts considered among the worst in a society built on trust and oath and loyalty. And it is not hell. Hell is not the worst destination. The worst destination has a different name, Nastrand. The Völuspá, the seeress's prophecy, one of the oldest and most important poems in the poetic Edda, describes it. Nastrand means corpse shore, the shore of corpses, and it is this. It is a hall, but not a hall of timber and thatch. Nastrand is a hall woven from the bodies of serpents. The walls and the roof and the very structure of the building are made of snakes, their bodies interlaced, their heads pointing inward. And from those heads, constantly, without ceasing, venom drips. The floor of Nastrand is not stone or earth, it is venom. The dead wade through it, breathe it, are saturated with it. Who ends up in Nastrand? The Völuspá is specific. Oath breakers, murderers, those who seduced another man's wife against her will. The phrasing in the original suggests a particularly treacherous form of violation. These are people who betrayed trust, who broke the most fundamental bonds that hold a society together, in a culture where an oath was not merely a promise but a sacred binding thing, where your word was the foundation of every alliance, every trade, every kinship. To break your oath was to commit an act against the fabric of the world itself. And above Nastrand, gnawing at the dead who lie there, is Nidhögg, the malice striker. A dragon, or a great serpent, the distinction blurs in the sources, who chews on the bodies of the dead in Nastrand, and who will continue to do so until Ragnarok, until the world's end, when even Nidhögg will finally be part of the last tremendous destruction. This is the real Viking hell, not hell, the cold, grey, quiet realm of ordinary death, Nastrand, the hall of snakes and venom and the gnawing dragon. It is smaller than hell and more specific, and reserved only for those who committed particular betrayals, and almost no one in popular storytelling ever mentions it. The name that got transmitted into Christian Europe, into our inherited vocabulary, was hell, a word for a grey and neutral place, and it became our word for the most extreme punishment imaginable. The actual place of Norse punishment, Nastrand, was lost in transmission. Something went missing in the crossing, which is perhaps fitting. Things go missing in crossings. The dead cross the Göl and some of their details don't make it to the other shore. History crosses time and the precise particulars blur. What survives is the structure, the hall, the punished, the boundary water, the guide at the gate, and not always the specific name. Let that observation sit with you for a moment as we prepare to move again, because there is something happening, something we have been watching build through Egypt and through Greece and through these Norse halls. A pattern that keeps reassembling itself in new materials, new names, new cosmologies, like water finding the same shape regardless of what vessel you pour it into, a guide, a crossing, a gate with a keeper, some form of judgment, a sorting, a place for those who lived well, a place for those who didn't, and somewhere, barely mentioned, always at the cold edge, a place for those who broke the deepest laws. The human mind, building the afterlife from scratch, always seems to build the same thing. We will return to that. It is the question this journey has been quietly asking since the beginning, and we will not leave it unanswered. But first, there is one more destination we need to reach before the final answer becomes possible. A destination that looks at first entirely different from everything we have seen. A tradition that does not describe a place you go to after death so much as a process you undergo. Not a hall, not a field, not a river with a coin toll. Something stranger, more intimate and in its own way, more unsettling than any of the monuments we have visited so far. We are going to Tibet, or rather, we are going to a state of being that the Tibetan tradition mapped in extraordinary detail. A state that exists in this tradition, not after death in the sense of a destination reached, but between death and whatever comes next. An in-between space, a middle passage. Neither one world nor the other, neither the life just ended nor the life still to come. The Tibetan word for it is bardo. Bardo means, most simply, in-between state. The syllable bar means between or middle, and do means suspended or thrown. A bardo is a gap, the space between one thing ending and the next beginning. In the broadest usage, the entire waking life can be understood as a bardo, the gap between birth and death. Dreaming is a bardo. The moment of death itself is a bardo. But the one that concerns us here, the one that the tradition maps in the most specific and elaborate detail, is the bardo of dying and what follows it, the intermediate state between one life and the next. The primary text is the Bardo Thodol. That name is usually translated into English as liberation through hearing during the intermediate state. In the West, it became famous under a different title, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a name given to it by the scholar W.Y. Evans Wentz when he published his English translation in 1927. That title stuck, even though it is a somewhat misleading shorthand for what the text actually is. The Bardo Thodol belongs to a category of Tibetan texts known as terma, hidden treasures. The tradition holds that these texts were composed by the great master Padmasambhava, a historical figure who brought Vajrayana Buddhism to Tibet in the 8th century, and that he concealed them to be discovered at the right moment, when the world was ready for their teachings. The Bardo Thodol, as it has come down to us, was compiled and first widely distributed around the 14th century. Its origin is therefore a combination of historical transmission and living tradition, not a single author in a single moment, but a text that was shaped and reshaped as it was carried forward. What the Bardo Thodol describes is this. At the moment of death, before the final dissolution of the body, there is an opening. A brief, blazing opening. The tradition calls it the clear light, or sometimes the luminosity of the dharmata, the essential nature of things as they are. It is described as a brilliance, a vast, open, luminous awareness that manifests to the dying person at the precise instant when consciousness begins to separate from the physical body. This clear light is not a stranger. According to the tradition, it is what you already are at the deepest level. It is the nature of your own mind, unobstructed, undistorted, without the layers of habit and fear and identity that cloud ordinary waking experience. You have glimpsed it in the best moments of meditation, perhaps, or in the moments between sleeping and waking when the mind is most transparent to itself. Now, at death, it presents itself fully, openly, without concealment. If you can recognize it, if, in that moment of enormous disorientation, you can see this blazing luminosity for what it is, can recognize your own nature in it and rest there, then liberation is possible. Immediate liberation. The cycle ends. You do not need to continue through the bardo at all. You are free. But the tradition is realistic about how difficult this recognition is. The moment of death is not peaceful for most people. It is confusing, disorienting, frightening. The habits of a lifetime press in. The mind, suddenly unmoored from the body, does not automatically recognize what it is seeing. And so, for most people, the clear light passes unrecognized. It arises and the mind, still caught in its old patterns, moves on. And the bardo continues. What follows, in the Bardo Thodol's mapping of the intermediate state, are a series of visions. First come the peaceful deities, radiant, colored, brilliant, extraordinarily beautiful, arising over a period of days in the traditional reckoning. These are not external beings separate from the one experiencing them. They are projections. They arise from the consciousness of the dead, shaped by the residue of that consciousness's accumulated patterns. They are, in a deep sense, you, your own mind, now freed from the body's constraints and projecting itself in these vivid forms. With each peaceful deity comes a choice. The deity appears alongside what the tradition calls a corresponding dull light, a softer, less intense glow representing the ordinary realms of confused existence. The brilliant light of the deity is liberation. The dull light is the pull of habit, the familiar gravity of samsara, the cycle of rebirth. If you can turn toward the brilliant light, if you can stay present with it and not flinch, liberation beckons again. And again, for most, the habit of flinching is too strong. The dull light feels safer. The brilliant light is too intense, too strange. Then come the wrathful deities, terrible forms, fearsome, armed, crowned with skulls, surrounded by fire and blood. In the logic of the text, these are the same deities as before, the same energies of awakened mind now appearing in their wrathful aspect because the peaceful forms were not recognized. They are still projections of the dead person's own mind. They are still, in essence, you, but they are terrifying. And the instruction the text gives, again and again across every vision of every deity, peaceful or wrathful, is the same. Do not be afraid. Recognize them. Recognize yourself in them. Turn toward the brilliant light. The lama reading the text aloud is present for all of this. This is one of the most remarkable aspects of the Tibetan tradition. The Bardo Thodol is not a text that the dead person read in life and remembered. It is a text that is read to them. After the death, a lama, a trained religious teacher, sits beside the body and reads the instructions aloud, not as eulogy, not as ceremony, as active guidance. The instructions are addressed directly to the dead person by name in the second person. You will see this. You will feel this. Do not be afraid. Recognize what you see. Turn toward the light. This continues. The lama reads. The dead person, somewhere in the unfolding of the bardo, is being coached through each stage, reminded at each threshold what they are looking at and how to respond. The reading continues in the traditional practice for up to 49 days. 49 days is the traditional duration of the intermediate state. 7 weeks. During this time, the consciousness of the dead person is still moving through the bardo, still experiencing the visions, still presented with choices, still capable of liberation at any moment if recognition becomes possible. The lama's voice, the text holds, can reach across the threshold between the living and the dead. The guidance is real. The instruction is real. Even when the body is gone, the coaching continues. There is something enormously compassionate about this. The idea that the dead are not abandoned, that the living do not simply bury or burn the body and turn away, that someone stays for 7 weeks if necessary, talking to the departed, guiding them, reminding them of what they are, not letting them navigate alone. Remember the psychopomp, the soul guide, the figure who knows both worlds and carries the dead between them. In the Greek tradition, Hermes and Charon. In the Egyptian tradition, Anubis. In the Norse tradition, the Valkyries, Modguder. In the Tibetan tradition, the lama sitting beside the body, voice steady, reading the instructions into the darkness. Not supernatural, not a deity, a human being trained and present, fulfilling the function that all those other figures fulfill, carrying the dead through the threshold, making sure no one crosses alone. After the 49 days, if liberation has not been achieved, if the consciousness has moved through all the visions and all the opportunities and has not recognized its own nature clearly enough to rest there, then the bardo narrows toward its final stage, and the soul prepares to be reborn. Which brings us to the great engine underneath both the Tibetan understanding and the broader Indian traditions from which it grew. The engine that runs not just the Tibetan map of the dead, but the entire cosmology of karma and rebirth, and the possibility, slow and difficult and real, of eventually being freed from the whole cycle. The engine is called samsara. But that is the next chamber of this long and intricate house we are moving through together. The night is generous. There is no hurry. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the coolness of the air as it moves into your chest, the warmth of it as it moves back out. Notice wherever you are settled, the weight of your body against the surface beneath you, the way that weight is simply held, without effort on your part, without anything required of you right now except to let yourself be held. We have crossed the Norse cold, walked the golden bridge over the Göl, stood at the door of the serpent hall of Nastrand, and sat in the bardo with the lama's voice reading into the quiet. Each of these places, each of these traditions has given us something to carry. The fighting and the feasting and the coming back to life each evening, the boar renewed and the mead flowing and the warriors who die gladly because dying is part of how they prepare. The cold of hell's hall with its named objects, hunger, famine, sickbed, not as punishment, but as the grey continuation of what was already wearing you down. The serpent-woven Nastrand, the exception reserved for those who broke the deepest bonds. And then the bardo, intimate, interior, the clear light of your own nature arising at the moment of death, the peaceful and wrathful visions unfolding like a long dream you move through toward the next beginning. These are different, vividly different. The Norse warrior paradise and the Tibetan intermediate state seem to have almost nothing in common on the surface. One is a hall of battle and feasting and communal fire. The other is a solitary interior journey through projections of your own mind. One ends in a final battle at the world's collapse. The other ends, ideally, in the dissolution of the self into a luminosity that was always already there. And yet both of them have a guide, both of them have a threshold, both of them have a logic, a reason why you end up where you end up, a mechanism that is not random. The Norse mechanism is the manner of your death, The Tibetan mechanism is the sharpness of your recognition, the clarity of your seeing, different criteria, the same basic structure, a door and someone who decides how it opens. We keep finding this, we cannot stop finding it. Wherever we go, the same bones show through. We will see it again clearly, unmistakably, in ways that the full light of the next stage will make almost impossible to overlook. But the body is tired. The mind is moving slowly now, following the thread through the dark with something that is less like effort and more like floating. The kind of following that happens when you have given up resisting and let yourself be carried. That is exactly right. Let the following be gentle. Let the thread carry you. The Norse halls are behind us. The Tibetan bardo is still faintly luminous around us. The lama's voice a faint echo, those 49 days of reading into the dark still reverberating. And ahead, the great engine of karma and rebirth, and the traditions that built their entire understanding of death, and what follows around the possibility that this is not the first time you have died and will not be the last, and that somewhere in all those crossings and returns there is a way, slow, possible, real, to finally come home. So let us step into the world of karma. The word itself is old, older than almost any written record. It comes from the Sanskrit root meaning simply action, what you do. And the teaching is ancient in its precision. What you do shapes what you become. Not in a vague, inspirational sense, in a mechanical one. The universe, in this view, is not indifferent. It keeps accounts. Every action leaves a residue, a trace, an imprint on the stuff that moves forward when this life ends. That residue is karma, and karma is what determines the shape of the next door. The cycle itself is called samsara. The word means something like wandering or flowing through. It is the endless movement through lives, through forms, through bodies, through circumstances that are always shifting and never quite arriving. You are born, you live, you die, you are born again. The conditions of the new birth are shaped by the karmic residue of the previous one, and the conditions of that birth shape what you do, and what you do shapes the next residue, on and on. The wheel does not stop on its own. In the Hindu understanding, what moves through this wheel is the Atman, the eternal self. The soul, if you want a rough translation, though the word soul carries a lot of Western luggage that does not quite fit. The Atman is not the personality. It is not your name or your preferences or the particular shape of your grief. It is something deeper and quieter than all of that. The witness underneath the witness, the awareness that does not change even as everything around it does. And what happens to it when you die is given one of the most beautiful images in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, verse 22. The verse says, "Just as a person puts on new garments and discards the old and worn-out ones, so the Atman assumes new bodies and discards the old." That is the image. Worn-out clothes, you take them off. You put on new ones. The one who dresses and undresses is not the clothing. The one who lives and dies is not the body. The Atman is the one who dresses, not the dress. It is an image that arrives with the quiet force of something that has been thought about very carefully for a very long time. Not dramatic, not a courtroom, not a ferryman, not a hall of warriors. Just the ordinary gesture of changing clothes at the end of a long day. And inside that ordinary gesture is an enormous claim that death is not the end of you, but the end of an outfit. That the one who is wearing this life, this name, this face, this collection of habits and loves and regrets, will, when the wearing is done, put on another now. There is a tradition that holds something that looks, on the surface, very similar to this, and it diverges from it at the deepest possible level. That tradition is Buddhism. Buddhism also teaches rebirth. It also teaches samsara, and the same word, the same wheel. It also teaches that the conditions of the next birth are shaped by karma, by the residue of action. In these structural ways, it is very close to the Hindu framework it grew from, and many people who encounter both assume they are saying the same thing. They are not. The divergence is one of the most carefully argued philosophical positions in the entire history of human thought, and it turns on a word, anatta, the Pali word from the ancient language of the earliest Buddhist texts. It means simply not self. And the teaching is this: there is no Atman, there is no eternal, unchanging self that moves from life to life like a passenger changing trains. There is no soul in that sense, no permanent thing that wears the clothes and then changes them. The clothes do not even have a permanent wearer. What then is reborn? This is the question that every new student of Buddhism eventually arrives at, usually with a sense of slight vertigo, because the answer is not simple and it is not comfortable. The classical image is two candles. You take a lit candle. Call it this life, this mind, this pattern of habit and tendency and longing. You hold it to an unlit candle, the flame passes. But does the same flame now burn in the new candle? Is it the same fire? No. The first fire caused the second fire. There is a continuity, a real causal connection, a pattern that transmitted itself, but there is no substance that traveled from one wick to the other. The fire is not a passenger, the fire does not go anywhere. That is how, in Buddhism, rebirth works without a soul. What continues is not a self, but a stream, a causal stream of tendencies and karma, one moment conditioning the next, this life conditioning the shape of the next life, the way one flame conditions the lighting of the next candle. Continuity without a carrier, connection without a traveler. And the goal, in both Hindu and Buddhist thought, is the same word differently understood: release. In Hinduism, it is moksha, liberation of the Atman from the wheel of samsara, reunion with the ultimate ground of being. In Buddhism, it is nirvana, the extinguishing. The Pali word for nirvana means literally the blowing out of a flame, not bliss, not a destination. The cessation of the fire that causes the next fire to ignite. The end of the causal chain. The wheel stopping, not because you have been rescued from it, but because the conditions that kept it turning are no longer present, which means in both of these vast traditions, the highest aspiration is not to go to a beautiful place after you die, it is to stop being reborn. The goal is not a reward, it is rest, the deepest rest. The rest that comes when there is no longer a self anxious enough to need reassurance or a wheel turning fast enough to need to stop. Take a moment with that, because it inverts everything the Western imagination tends to project onto these traditions. We tend to picture reincarnation as a second chance, a kind of hopeful upgrade. You come back, you do better, you eventually make it to a pleasant place. But in its own terms, samsara is not an opportunity. It is a predicament. The wheel is not a gift. It is the thing you are trying to escape. Every birth is another round of suffering and loss. Moksha and nirvana are not beginnings, they are endings, the most complete and welcome kind. And while the wheel turns before the release arrives, which may take in these traditions not one life, but many hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives, there are intermediate stations. In Hindu cosmology, karma may send you to Svarga, which is sometimes translated as heaven, or to Naraka, which maps roughly to hell. But here is the thing that matters. They are not permanent. This is one of the most important distinctions between these systems and the Abrahamic ones, and it tends to get lost in casual comparisons. Svarga is a paradise of great beauty and pleasure, reached through accumulated merit, where a soul spends time in conditions of extraordinary lightness, and Naraka is a realm of suffering and difficulty, where karma of a more painful kind is worked through. But both are temporary. They are, in a very precise sense, way stations. The karma that sent you there eventually exhausts itself, and you return to the wheel to be born again, continuing the long arc toward moksha. Not eternal damnation, not eternal paradise, a layover. Your karma buys you a ticket. When it runs out, you fly again. Watching over all of this, the weighing of lives, the record of actions, the sorting of the dead, is a figure who appears so consistently across Hindu and Buddhist cosmology that he counts as one of the most widely shared characters in the mythology of death anywhere on Earth. His name is Yama. Yama is the Lord of Death. In the Hindu texts, he is described as the first mortal to have died, which is why he knows the way. He is not a god who decreed death, but a being who underwent it first and now guides the others. He holds a noose. He has a register. He weighs, in some accounts, or his servants do, the Chitragupta, keepers of the record book, what each soul has done, and he pronounces the destination. Yama, the judge. Yama, the weigher. Yama, the one who holds the ledger. The same figure, under variations of the same name, appears in the Tibetan Bardo teachings as the Dharma king of the dead who confronts the soul with the mirror of its actions. He appears in Chinese Buddhist cosmology as Yanluo Wang. He spreads through the entire religious imagination of Asia, from the Indian subcontinent to Tibet to China to Japan, changed in form but recognizable in function. The Lord of the Dead, the one who weighs. You have met him before. He stood in the Hall of Two Truths under a different name. He sat in the court of three judges on the other side of the river Styx under three different names. The judge is always there. Wherever the human imagination builds a death, it builds a judge beside it. We do not seem able to imagine death without some form of accounting for what we did, which brings us west, which brings us, finally, to the traditions closest to home for many who are listening. The Abrahamic religions, the traditions of the book, the family of faiths that traces itself back through Islam and Christianity to Judaism and, beneath all of them, to the ancient world of the Near East. And here, the first surprise may be one of the largest in this entire journey, because if you ask most people what the Hebrew Bible, what the Torah, what the oldest Jewish scriptures says about the afterlife, they will probably tell you something about heaven and hell, about reward for the righteous and punishment for the wicked, and they will be describing something that is not really there, not in the oldest layers, not in the Torah as it was written. The Hebrew Bible's picture of what happens after death is, by the standards of Egypt or Greece or the Norse or the Hindus, remarkably thin. The dead go to Sheol, that is almost the whole of it. Sheol is described in various places in the scriptures, in Psalms, in Ecclesiastes, in the book of Job, and what it is described as is not a paradise or a place of punishment. It is a shadow realm, a dim underworld where all the dead go, regardless of how they lived. The righteous and the wicked, the generous and the cruel. Sheol receives them all, and Sheol holds them all in the same grey quiet. If that sounds familiar, it is because you have been there before. Sheol and the asphodel meadows are structural twins. The default neutral underworld, the grey and featureless place where the average soul simply goes without reward or punishment, just the dim continuation of the diminished shade. Two traditions that appear utterly different, arriving at the same cold room. The rich, vivid afterlife architecture that most people associate with Judaism, the resurrection of the dead, the detailed picture of paradise, the moral sorting of souls, does not come from the Torah itself. It develops later. It develops in what scholars call the Second Temple period, roughly the 5 centuries before the Common Era and the few centuries of the Common Era, a time of enormous intellectual ferment in Jewish thought when contact with other traditions and other ideas was reshaping the tradition from within. The resurrection of the dead becomes a major feature of Jewish belief in this period. The afterlife becomes more detailed, more morally differentiated. The grey Sheol begins to acquire the features of a place where righteousness matters. And here, quietly, an enormously provocative idea from the scholarship of religious history. Where did those ideas come from? Many historians, not all, but many serious scholars of the ancient world argue that the tradition that did the most to reshape the Jewish understanding of death and what follows was Zoroastrianism, a religion older than the Abrahamic family, centered on the worship of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, the god of truth and light, a Persian religion, the religion of the empire that conquered Babylon and freed the Jews from captivity in the 6th century before the Common Era, the religion of Cyrus the Great, who the Hebrew Bible itself calls anointed. Zoroastrianism, in its ancient forms, had an afterlife teaching of remarkable elaboration. It had a final judgment, it had a resurrection of the dead, it had a heaven and a hell, it had a bridge. The bridge is called the Chinvat Bridge. It stretches across the abyss, from the world of the living to the land of the dead, and it is described this way. For the righteous, the Chinvat Bridge widens beneath their feet as they cross. It broadens, it steadies, and they walk across into paradise, into the presence of Ahura Mazda and the realm of endless light. But for the wicked, the bridge does something different. It narrows, it thins, it reduces as the soul sets foot on it to the width of a blade's edge, and then to nothing. And they fall. They fall into the abyss, into the darkness below, into the realm of lies and falsehood, the opposite of Ahura Mazda's truth, the domain of Angra Mainyu, the hostile spirit. They fall into something that functions structurally in exactly the way that hell functions in the traditions that may have received this idea from Zoroastrianism. Because here is what the scholarly argument suggests: that when the Jews returned from Babylon, from their long encounter with Persian civilization and its religion, they carried back not just the experience of captivity and liberation, but ideas that did not replace their own, but wove into them, deepened them, gave them new architecture. The vivid resurrection, the detailed final judgment, the paradise of the righteous and the pit of the wicked, the bridge. And from Judaism, these ideas passed, along with much else, into Christianity. And from the same deep soil, they passed into Islam. Which means that when a Christian imagines heaven and hell, and when a Muslim imagines Jannah and Jahannam, they may be inheriting, at some deep and usually invisible structural level, an image that was first carefully drawn by a Persian priest in the 6th century before the Common Era, staring into a fire burning for Ahura Mazda. This is a scholarly argument, not a settled fact. There is real debate about how much flowed and when and how, but it is a serious argument made by serious historians, and it reframes the family resemblance of the Western afterlife traditions in a way that is difficult to set aside once you have heard it. All of them may have the same great-grandfather, and his name is Zoroastrian. Now, Islam. Islam's picture of what follows death is architectural in its precision, and in certain of its features it arrives with a sensory specificity that is unusual even by the standards of the other traditions we have visited. It begins, in some ways, before death is even fully processed. Because according to the Hadith tradition, the corpus of the Prophet Muhammad's sayings and deeds that forms a major pillar of Islamic teaching, the reckoning does not wait. The night of the burial, two angels come. Their names are Munkar and Nakir. They come to the grave, to the body in the ground, and they question the dead. They ask who your Lord is. They ask what your religion is. They ask who your prophet was. The correct answers bring peace and the wide expansion of the grave. A tradition that describes the grave itself as either a garden of paradise or a pit of Jahannam, depending on what the dead soul holds. The incorrect answers, or the inability to answer, the silence of someone who did not know or did not believe, bring a different response. There is something deeply human about this image, that the reckoning comes that quickly, that you are not given long to settle in. That the night of your burial, the questions are already there, waiting in the dark. Not cruel questions, but real ones. The kind that have no room for evasion. Then the soul waits in a state called al-barzakh, an intermediate state until the day of resurrection. And on that day, all the dead are raised. And the accounting begins in full. Every deed is weighed. The instrument is the mizan, the scales. The Arabic word means simply the balance, the weighing device, the same image that stood in the Hall of Two Truths under Anubis, the same scale that appears in Christian representations of the Last Judgment, the same fundamental mechanism. The record of actions, or every one of them, is laid against the scale. Good deeds on one side, bad deeds on the other, and the balance determines what comes next. What comes next is the crossing. The bridge is called As-Sirat, and the description of it in the Hadith tradition is precise in a way that is almost unsettling. It is a bridge stretched across the fire of Jahannam, finer than a hair and sharper than a sword. Every soul must cross it. There is no path around it. The righteous cross it with speed and ease, some like lightning, some like a fast horse, some like a running man, the pace of the crossing determined by the weight of the soul's faith and deeds. The wicked cross more slowly or stumble or lose their footing on the blade-thin surface and fall into the fire below. You have been on this bridge before. You stood at the Chinvat Bridge and watched it widen for the righteous and narrow to a blade for the wicked. The same bridge, the same logic, the same terrifying architecture of a crossing that reveals the soul by whether it can stand. Across the bridge, Jannah, paradise. The word itself, Jannah, means a garden. Gardens beneath which rivers flow. The Quranic phrase is repeated again and again, like a refrain, a sound that plants the image. Water, flowing water, shade, the cooling of a place that gives relief. And the word for what that garden is, at its root, is something very close to a word that goes back much further than Arabic, much further than Islam, much further even than the Persian culture that Zoroastrianism shaped. The English word paradise comes from an old Persian word, pairidesa, a walled garden, an enclosure of cultivated green within the landscape, the kind of garden that in an arid climate is not ornament, but miracle, not decoration, but survival, not luxury, but the deepest possible image of what a benevolent place would feel like. Surrounded by walls that keep the desert out. Water inside. Shade inside. Life inside. That word, paradisa, paradise, became the Greek paradisos, and the Greek passed into Latin, and the Latin passed into every European language. And the image it carries is always the same, a walled garden, an enclosed green place of living water and shelter. That image is Eden. That image is Jannah. That image is, with some adjustment, the field of reeds along the banks of an idealized Nile, lush and abundant, the place where the worthy Egyptian dead woke into their best life. One image, spreading, adapting, staying underneath its adaptations, the same image, a place of water and green and walls that keep the hard world out. The human imagination, when it reaches for what reward looks like after death, reaches for a garden. Again and again. Across languages and centuries and traditions that in some cases had no contact with each other, the garden is what paradise means, the garden is what the longing is for, and now we have travelled far enough to look back. Far enough to see the whole shape of the territory we have moved through, from the Hall of Two Truths in Egypt to the rivers of Hades, to the halls of Valhalla and the cold quiet of hell, to the 49 days of the Tibetan bardo, to the wheel of samsara and the two candles of the Buddhist rebirth, to the grey Sheol, and the second temple shift, to the questioning angels in the grave, and the bridge thinner than a hair. We have been to all of these places, and now we can see what we kept finding. The first thing we kept finding was the guide. Everywhere, almost without exception, the dead do not travel alone. Anubis takes the hand of the Egyptian soul and leads it to the hall. Charon rows the Greek soul across the Styx. The Valkyries descend onto the field of battle to choose and escort the Nordic dead. Hermes psychopompos. The soul guide, which is what that Greek word means, leads the dead to the threshold. In the Tibetan bardo, the lama's voice guides the deceased through the terrifying landscape of the intermediate state, reading into the dark across 49 days, a voice following a soul through the places where it cannot see. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, Yama's servants come to collect the soul and bring it to judgment. Munkar and Nakir come to the grave. The guide comes. There is a word for this figure in the scholarship of religion and mythology: psychopomp, soul guide. The being whose job is the escort of the dead. And the psychopomp appears in cultures so separated by geography and time that transmission from one to another is not credible as an explanation. It is not that one tradition copied the psychopomp from another. It is that something about the human imagination, something about the way we build the idea of death when we build it from scratch, keeps arriving at the same place. The dead need someone to show them the way. We cannot imagine them navigating it alone. We cannot leave them without accompaniment. What does it mean that we keep imagining this? Perhaps it means that the deepest human anxiety about death is not annihilation, but abandonment. Not that there will be nothing after, but that there will be no one with you in it. The psychopomp is the answer to that fear. Wherever you are going, someone knows the way. Someone is coming with you. You will not be alone in the dark. The second thing we kept finding was the crossing, a river, a bridge, a threshold that must be traversed. Charon's river, which you cannot cross without a coin. The Styx, which the gods themselves swore by. The Gyalabru bridge over the river Gyal, guarded by the maiden Modguda, who asks the dead their names and counts their numbers. The As-Sirat stretched across the fire. The Chinvat bridge that widens or narrows. The river of forgetfulness, the Lethe, that the Greek souls drank from before returning. There is something the crossing means, there is something the threshold is for. Wherever it appears, the water, the bridge, the gate, the passageway, it marks a boundary that cannot be uncrossed. It makes death permanent. It converts the ambiguous goneness of the newly dead into something decided. You are over the river. You cannot come back. The crossing is the moment where this world ends and that world begins, and the human imagination, drawing that map again and again, keeps drawing a line, a river, a bridge. Something you go across and cannot come back from. And notice something strange about the river. The Greeks had the Lethe, the river of forgetting. Drink from it before you return to the world of the living, and you forget everything. Your past life, your loves, your name. You begin again, blank. And the reincarnating soul in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology arrives in a new life without memory of the old one. Why don't we remember our past lives? Because we forget. The same logical problem. The same elegant structural solution. Two traditions that arrived at the same mechanism for answering the question. Here, it is a river you drink from. There, it is the nature of the rebirth process itself. But both answers say you forget when you cross. The forgetting is built in. The forgetting is the price of the return. The third thing we kept finding was the weighing, the scale, the judgment. The moment where what you did, not what you believed, not what family you were born into, not what name you carried, but what you actually did is measured against a fixed standard. Egypt weighs the heart against the feather of Ma'at, cosmic order, truth. Greece convenes 3 judges who consider the life. Islam weighs every deed on the mizan. Christianity rehearses the Last Judgment. Zoroastrianism has the Chinvat bridge, which is itself a kind of weighing, the soul's weight determining whether the bridge widens or narrows. The Hindu Chitragupta keeps the record book, everywhere, a record, everywhere, a reckoning, everywhere. The idea that what you did matters, that the universe is not indifferent, that your actions accumulate into something that does not disappear when you do. And think about how unusual this is. Think about how it would feel if the afterlife traditions of the world had arrived at something else entirely. If they had said consistently that death is random, that the destination is determined by birth or by luck or by the prayers of the powerful or by nothing at all. They could have said that. Some traditions in some moods lean that way. But the dominant architecture, the one that recurs with the greatest consistency across the most separated traditions, is moral. The weighing is moral. What you did is what matters. The scale is the universe's insistence that how you lived had weight. What does it mean that we keep building this, that every civilization building a death from scratch keeps building a scale? Maybe it means that we cannot make sense of life without it. That a world where what you do ultimately does not matter is a world the human mind refuses to fully inhabit. The scale is not just a belief about the afterlife, it is a belief about the present one. It is the insistence, told in the shape of a story about after death, that this, right now, the thing you are doing, the way you are treating the person in front of you, has weight, has consequence, is being somewhere counted. And the fourth thing we kept finding was the garden, the enclosed green place, the water and the shade, the walled world where the difficult part is finally over. Aru, the field of reeds, where the Egyptian dead harvested grain along a river more generous than the Nile ever was. The Elysian fields where the Greek heroes sat in permanent light. Svarga, where the merit of a Hindu life translated into a temporary paradise before the next birth. Jannah, the gardens beneath which rivers flow. Eden, the garden at the beginning that is also, in some readings, the garden at the end, the shape of the original home that we have always been trying to get back to. The garden is not an accident. It is the deepest image the imagination produces for good, not a palace, not a city, not a library or a hall of light. A garden, living things, water, something growing, something that receives the care you give it and gives back abundance in return. The garden is where effort and tenderness and patience and the slow rhythms of seasons become visible as what they were always being, worthwhile. All of this, the guide, the crossing, the weighing, the garden, was built independently by civilizations that had no contact with each other, using languages that share no common root, worshipping gods who do not know each other's names. The Egyptians and the Norse never traded philosophy. The Tibetan lamas and the Islamic scholars never compared notes on the architecture of what follows. And yet the same bones keep showing through, the same structure, the same questions answered with the same shapes. There are different ways to interpret that. One way is historical. Some of these traditions did borrow from each other. The Zoroastrian roots of the Abrahamic afterlife are a real scholarly argument. Greek and Egyptian traditions had centuries of contact and cross-pollination. The spread of Buddhist ideas through Asia carried Yama and his judgments into a dozen different cosmologies. Transmission is real. Ideas travel. The Chinvat Bridge and the As-Sirat are probably not entirely independent inventions. But transmission does not explain all of it. It does not explain why the Egyptian afterlife and the Norse one, which had no meaningful contact, both arrive at a guide and a judgment. It does not explain why the independent branches of the reincarnation traditions and the Greek underworld both solve the problem of why the reborn forget their past lives with the same mechanism. It does not explain why the human imagination, when reaching for the image of paradise, keeps landing in a garden. There is another way to interpret it. Not historical, but psychological. Not about what traveled where, but about what the human mind is built from, about what questions we cannot help asking, and what shapes those questions take when they finally become answers. Every one of these traditions is answering the same questions. What happens to the person I love when they die? Where did they go? Is what I do with my life accounted for somewhere? Is there a way out of the suffering of being alive? And if so, what is it? Will I be alone in whatever comes next? These are not culturally specific questions. They are human ones. They arise from having a self, knowing that self will end, and being unable to make full peace with that. They arise from loving people and losing them. They arise from the need to believe, or at least to hope, that the universe has some structure that makes meaning possible. And the answers, built separately, keep having the same shape. Because the questions are the same. Because the human mind, wherever it finds itself, is working with the same materials, the knowledge of mortality, the weight of what we do, the longing for continuation and for justice, and for something, somewhere, that feels like home. What we discovered on this journey, moving from the Hall of Two Truths to the Bank of the Styx, to the walls of Valhalla, to the Tibetan Bardo, to the Wheel of Karma and Rebirth, to the grave and the questioning angels and the bridge over the fire, is not that different cultures believe different things. We knew that. That is easy. That is the surface. What we discovered is that underneath the different things, the same building keeps appearing, the same floor plan, the same load-bearing walls, the guide beside you, the crossing you cannot undo, the scale that tells the truth about what you did, the garden that waits on the other side of all of it. The answer to the question in the title of this journey, where do we go when we die, is honestly that no one in the living world knows. Every tradition we visited was built by people who had not been there. Every map was drawn from this side of the river. The most honest thing we can say about the destination is that it remains the one place no traveler has reliably returned from to compare notes. But that is not quite the full answer. Because what this journey has shown is something that does not depend on any destination being real. What it has shown is this: the human mind, across all its variations and all its centuries, has consistently refused to let death be the end of meaning. Every one of these traditions is, in some form, the insistence that what we do matters, that who we are has weight, that the scale is real, whatever form it takes, that we will not travel the last road alone, That insistence across Egypt and Greece and the Norse countries and Tibet and the Indian subcontinent and the Persian world and the Jewish world and the Christian and the Islamic is itself a kind of answer. Not to where we go, but to what we are, creatures for whom meaning does not stop at the grave, creatures who need the guide and the crossing and the scale and the garden badly enough to build them separately everywhere they have ever lived. There is something extraordinary about that, something that is easy to miss if you treat these traditions as quaint historical relics or competing truth claims. But if you step back far enough to see the whole shape of what the human imagination keeps producing, and if you see the same map being drawn again and again by hands that could not have known about each other, it becomes something else. It becomes evidence of something. Not necessarily evidence that any particular afterlife is real, but evidence that something in us keeps reaching in the same direction, keeps asking the same questions, keeps drawing the same map because the same deep need produces it. That map has a guide on it, a crossing, a weighing, a garden. And whether or not anyone can tell you what lies on the far side of the river, it is something to carry with you into the night. That every civilization that ever looked at the darkness on the other side of death, looked back at themselves, looked at what they had done, and how they had loved and whether they had been true, and said, "This matters. What I do here matters. The scale is real." Wherever you are right now, whatever you have been carrying into this night, that thought is for you. The crossing is ahead for all of us. The guide, in all the traditions we have visited, is never absent. The scale in all of them weighs what is real, and the garden in all of them is the word for home. Take a slow, deep breath. Let yourself feel the weight of the night, the quiet that has gathered around you while we walked through all of these places, through Egypt and Greece and the frozen north and the luminous Bardo and the great wheel of Karma and the bridge thinner than a hair. All of those places, all of those answers to the same question, all of that reaching. You do not need to remember any of it. If one image stayed with you, the feather balanced against a heart, the coin in the jaw of the dead, the warriors waking to feast, the candle lighting the next candle, the bridge that widens for the righteous, let that be enough. Let that be whatever it needs to be for you tonight. We have met the ferryman. We have met the scale. We have stood at the threshold and looked across, as human beings have always stood and looked across, and felt the full weight of the not knowing, and also the strange, stubborn, recurring warmth of the not being alone in it. Sleep now. Let the thread go. Let the crossing wait. It has waited this long, and it is patient. And you are still here, still on this side, still in this particular borrowed and temporary and extraordinary body in this particular night, with whatever love and difficulty and ordinariness your life is made of. That is the whole of what is needed right now. That is everything. Be wise in the simplest way there is tonight, and rest.